All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. John here from Home Inspection Authority. Today, we are back with none other than Bud Hayes. Bud Hayes is back. I had to give him the applause because our studio audience out there is growing.
Yeah.
So we're getting a lot of viewers and a lot of listeners out there. So, Bud, how are you? How you been?
Pretty good. It's been interesting times the last couple of years.
It has. Since the last time we did the Section 1, it's been a few months. It's been a few months since we've done that.
November we did it. We were trying to get it done in December, and now it's already February.
Yeah, it is. It's like whew, everything's flying right by already. It's been a slow start to the year for me as far as inspections go. It hasn't been slammed for me in January. Typically, it's a little busier for me. I only did like 17 houses last month. Typically, I do like 25, 30. So it was a little slow. But this month here, it seems to be picking back up.
Yeah, traditionally, I always take vacation over Christmas and New Year's because that's always slow.
Yeah.
And so I might as well just get out of town and enjoy the family, go visit. And then it's been a little slow start. Last couple of years have been very little commercial inspections for office buildings.
Oh, it slowed down?
Yeah. Well, offices are closed, retail spaces and offices.
Yeah.
So there's so many vacancies there that, so as the economy starts picking up, then that's, but I'm going to be doing a third one. I've done a couple recently. I'm going to be doing a third one. I'm going to be flying up to Portland to inspect a building that they're purchasing up there.
Really?
So, yeah.
Do you have a license up there? Do you need one?
Well, I'm not doing, it's a commercial building, number one. Okay. And basically what I'm doing is as a consulting. So I'm going to go up there and look at it. And,
sure.
And, but, we're general inspectors. So we're like primary care physicians giving a general checkup. And then when we see things like, hey, we need this specialist to follow up. And
that's correct.
So even though we're out of state, then you want to get a roofer that's licensed in Oregon in that area. If you're recommending a roofer.
Gotcha.
So, but yeah, January is usually slow. I think it'd be busier. There's not very much inventory for new houses. A lot of people, there's not a lot for sale.
Right.
So you get multiple offers and.
I don't even try to understand that stuff, man. It's just, I hear different things from different realtors and different people every day, and it's like, I just wait for the phone to ring,
Well, nowadays, it's quite common to only have a 5-day contingency period. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, that means they're trying to schedule jobs before they have the accepted offer so they can come on the first day.
Yeah.
And
or they're scheduling you before they even get the accepted offer, and then they cancel on you. That happens too.
Well, yeah, I have had a couple like that. But,
I think we all have those. Yeah, we all have those.
But they're usually up front with me. Like, I'll hold this spot for you. Let me know if you get the offer and follow it up.
All right.
If somebody else wants it at that time, I'll call them first to see.
That's a good way of doing it. Yep. I tell them the same thing. Look, if you're just inquiring, well, this is my availability.
Yeah.
If you want me to schedule, I need clients' information, and you need to have opened escrow. So I'm pretty upfront about it.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to go through the scheduling process if oh, by the way, we didn't get it. Oh, me, you didn't get it. Why'd you call me?
Yeah.
Okay. Because when it gets busy, it gets busy. So you just want to schedule the people who are serious and get them locked in.
Yeah, but that shrunk contingency period kind of puts a neurosis on the whole.
Yeah, it's
hard
a little
to plan.
Crazy. It's a little crazy right now. So, which chapter are you running right now? CREIA chapter.
Well, I'm part of the LA Mid Valley chapter, which we meet in. Now we're meeting at Acapulco Restaurant.
Which is where we used to go.
Yes, we went a couple years ago. And then we went to another restaurant. This month we decided to go back for different reasons.
Yep.
And it was a great turnout. We had a Nick from the LA sewer line there.
Right.
And
yeah, I couldn't make that one. I was pretty busy.
I learned a lot. I thought, oh, what do I need to know? And it was like, no, he got into details of how they fix things and the new liner material and how they can do different kinds of repairs. I go, that was...
I got to be honest with you. I was a little shocked when I saw that email about the speaker for that particular thing, because I remember when I was there trying to push new ideas on people, I said, hey, why don't we get a termite inspector in here? Everyone's like, no, we don't do termites. What do we want a termite inspector in here for? Yeah, my point? It's good to know what these other inspectors are looking for. There's nothing wrong with learning another trade or another inspection process. It's going to help you be a better home inspector. And that's what I was trying to push when I was chapter president and the vice president over there. But I was getting a lot of just pushback on that. I was like, okay. So I was surprised to see the sewer guy there.
Well,
but I'm happy to see it. I'm happy to see it.
Yeah, it's all volunteer
Yeah.
Group. And so all the people, the person that's like the education chair right now is Vicki Thomas.
Yep.
And she's actually doing a good job.
Yep.
And it's great to get she's been an inspector only a couple years. And
why don't you pull your mic a little closer?
Oh.
Just pull it closer to you so you can be comfortable.
Okay.
More.
And so...
Yeah, there you go.
So it's great for new inspectors to get involved in the chapter and do things like, either help with the emails or secretary duties or education is a great position because then you get to learn and talk to different specialists and get it set up. And I found when I've done that in the past, I've learned a lot from just contacting the guys and getting them set up.
Yeah.
Go over what you're going to talk about. And most speakers, we always try and keep it oriented towards, educating us, but talking to us about whatever component or system that they're dealing with that we can observe. So if a heating and air conditioning guy is going to talk, then he's going to give us little pointers of like what to look for.
Right.
Because, we don't dismantle it. We don't take the covers off and go inside and necessarily you can't look at the burners, but that's what he would do oftentimes.
Any A coils and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but it's a great venue, especially for newer inspectors or even people. We encourage anyone to come in if they want to learn about it, and if they're thinking about wanting to become an inspector.
Sure.
Come to the meeting. That's one of the duties I do there. I'm a certified trainer. So I always have an open door if on new inspectors, they have to get ride-alongs done and certain things signed off. Yep. So I'm always willing to try and help.
Yep. What I want to do, and I was going to ask you about this, is I'd like to get some new inspectors who may be part of the chapter who are fairly new and just have a talk with them. Hey, what is it that you're like worried about? Or what are your concerns? Or what don't you understand? I'd love to have a new guy sitting here with me just to go over it so I can help out, and just kind of give him that kind of information and kind of lead him in the right path, or him or her. So if you could think of anybody when we're done, let me know, and we'll get him in here. Yeah, get him on the podcast. So you want to get into this CREIA thing?
Yeah. So CREIA, which is the California Real Estate Inspection Association, which we're talking about, we have standards of practices that we follow. One of the things in our chapter for educational purposes is we're supposed to review these with the whole group once a year.
Right.
So, I don't know how many times I've gone through it. I still go through it. I still go, oh, yeah, I forgot about this part. Or, oh, now I can see where this is more relevant.
That's why we're recording it, bud.
Yeah.
So we can just do it one last time and just make them watch the video.
So as I get older, I can watch it and go, oh, yeah, I remember I knew that.
That's when I was a young whippersnapper.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So we've already covered section 1, foundation, basement, and underfloor areas in a previous episode. So now we're going to get into section 2, which is exteriors.
Yes.
So on section 2, exteriors, items to be inspected, surface grade directly adjacent to the building. I want to stop and just kind of cover this section because this is a huge one. I want to put huge emphasis on this because this lack of drainage around a house is something to make sure you report on, whether it's there or not there. I've heard stories from some lawyer I know that you know about inspectors ignoring whether there's drainage or not on a property.
Ooh.
And that turning into a bigger issue later on down the road. And I personally, within the past 2 weeks, inspected a house again that I had previously inspected like 2 or 3 weeks earlier. The crawl space was completely saturated with water.
Mm.
I mean, there was standing water in multiple areas, but it was like the perfect storm. The house had no rain gutters.
Okay.
It had a concrete patio area in the back of the house, and the crawl space access was basically like a big drain.
Oh no!
Because there was no curb around it. So any rainwater from the roof, hundreds of gallons at a time when it's raining heavy, right? Pouring right into that opening. Not to mention any of that rainwater that landed on the walkway in the patio was pouring right into it as well.
So the whole patio was sloped wrong?
It was sloped wrong, and it was like basically the access to the crawl space was a big drain, and all the water from that side of the house was just going right into it. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. It looks like it's been like this for years. I'm like, man, that's crazy. So then I go around the other side of the house. I do see one drain, a catch basin out there. And then on another area, I saw like one small drain. So I'm like, okay, well, did it just rain here? Why is there so much water under here? This looks like it's been going on for years, not just last week.
Right.
You know, you can tell the difference when you look. Okay, this just happened. This is a one-off. Or no, you look under there, you look at the drain pipe, you see dirt at the bottom of the drain pipe because that means the water rose that high.
Right.
And that dirt just stuck to the pipe. So I'm like, man, this is nasty. I said, I'm not getting under there because it's too wet. And I could see with my flashlight, I poked my head in, and I could see electrical conduit all stretched out, wires sitting in the dirt. I'm like, I'm not going in there.
No.
And as soon as I say that, the plumbers show up and they jump right in. I'm like, hope I'm not calling an ambulance. So I didn't go in there. And I said, yeah, I'm not going in there. I was going to put my crawl bot in there, but there was so much mud, it would have got stuck. And then I would have had to go get it. So I just said, I'm not going to do that part today. Find out where this water's coming from because I don't think it's a drainage issue only. I think there's something else going on here. So they waited 10 days, about 10 days or 2 weeks, right around 2 weeks. And they asked me to come back. And the sellers said that the people who do all the cleanups for mold cleanups and stuff like that, they came out and put fans in. I'm like, oh, great. So if they knew what they were doing, they probably put fans at all the clean outs and everything else. And I show up and I'm like, who put that fan there? The fans were outside the crawl space. They were blowing air into the crawl space.
Oh.
I'm like, who the hell did? I'm like, I look at my client. I say, hey man, I don't know who's managing this problem, but they don't know what they're doing. He goes, really? I said, yeah, that's not how that goes. I mean, you got to get the fans in there, pushing the air out. You got to pull that moist air out. So I was able to get in. It was a lot drier in most areas, but it was still wet. It was a little damp. But some areas still had standing water. And I'm like, what the hell's going on here? So
that
it turns out
after there was heavy rains last month?
No, there was heavy rains prior to my first visit there.
Okay.
But that still wasn't enough to soak all the way into the middle. You get it? It was like the middle, the whole crawl space was damp. It was really crazy. And I found out there was, during my inspection, there was minimal ventilation. They could have had a whole row of vents along this whole wall. There was none.
Right.
It's like somebody went over them and covered them up or something. So this was a perfect storm. So getting back to the what we're talking about here, the surface grade directly adjacent to the buildings, you definitely don't want to ignore the absence of drains. And you want to write that up for sure. You don't want to ignore that, because I've heard too many stories about guys just, they never mentioned there was no drains and there's no rain gutters. That all leads to problems.
Well, a situation like yours, whenever there's moisture underneath the house like that, that's enough moisture that just allows mold to grow.
Yes.
And, not only mold.
And we did find that. I did find that as well.
Mold, bacteria, fungus, it usually has a strong, musty smell to it.
Yeah.
And then you can, and all that a lot of times goes up into the house. You can smell it. You open up a closet, you go, wow, that smells funny, and that's the air coming up. But we just covered the foundation section, but just on this alone, most foundation problems are moisture related.
Correct.
So if you have any kind of drainage issues in the house, towards the house, etc., that's going to cause the foundation. So
negative grade, any negative grade, lack of drainage, no rain gutters, that makes a difference.
I just came from a 1920-something duplex, and I'd inspected it a couple months ago. Went back to just check on how things were going. But the backyard sloped towards the house, and there's a big tree real close to the house. But the biggest problem with that tree is that it grew up so like all the water from the main drain wouldn't go down around the house. Now it just dams it up, and there's foundation issues there, and so I came back. They removed the tree, but there's this big pile of dirt, so it's still doing the same thing and working like a dam. I go, we gotta clean all this out. But there was there were foundation issues. The house had settled like a few inches, and this is very slow. Just slowly settled. And inside, there's a little bit of unevenness of floor in there, but there's like no major stress cracks.
So the whole building might have went instead of just one area.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, but it was all moisture related.
It always is.
Yeah.
It always is. I mean, what does efflorescence come from? Moisture. Where does spalling come from? It's a worst case scenario than efflorescence. Right. Everything's moisture related.
Right.
It causes cracks. It causes bad conditions underneath the building. It's always moisture.
Yeah, so we want to keep that away. I mean, I've seen old brick apartment buildings where the roof drain comes in, connects to an area drain, so they've got all the water controlled around the house, and like no issues with the building.
Right.
And then next week you go in, doesn't have proper drainage, and there's just all kinds of problems.
Right.
From the foundation.
So I want to end this little section with this last note is, when you're inspecting the perimeter of the house, just if you're noticing there's no drains in one area and there's drains in other areas, keep that in the back of your head when you go under the house, because you may see evidence of moisture where those drains are not, and then you may not see it where there's actual drainage. So it just kind of gives you something to fall back on when you're under the house going, oh, why is it there and not over there? Or why is it over here? And it just gives you a little idea of how to troubleshoot it and try to figure out where it's coming from. You want to jump on the next one?
Sure. Second item here is doors and windows.
Woohoo!
So these are items that we're supposed to inspect. So, when we're looking at it from the exterior, we want to make sure there's no rotted wood, that they're sealed properly, Are they waterproofed? Well, we'll know that when we go on the inside, but we just want to have, what do you observe on the exterior around? Windows, we usually look at wood windows. They'll be more prone to rotting if there's moisture problems. Older metal windows have got their own problems if they're the old crank kind.
If they're old, they're old.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what they are. When they're old, and it shows if no one's maintaining them.
Yeah, so in a person, when they're buying, investing in an apartment building, they have, 60 or 80-year-old windows. You kind of go, well, this is going to be a major capital investment coming up here soon. You're going to have to start replacing the windows, so that you better keep that in mind.
Right.
So, I'm not sure what else to say on that.
Oh, I got all kinds of stuff to say on that. Okay.
Oh,
so
yeah.
regarding windows, definitely look at them from the outside when you're doing your exteriors. Number one, you want to look at how they're installed. Just the other day, I found 2 windows with the screws on the outside of the house. The screws were screwed in on the sides all the way around on the outside. That was the first I've seen that. So it happens. So you want to take a good look at window frames. If you can also spot failed seals between double pane glass or triple pane glass from the outside. Any kind of cloudiness in windows. I would put emphasis on windows and doors because they can be expensive to replace depending on what kind of window or door it is. So you don't want to just walk right by doors and windows. You want to take a good look at them. I always hit it with a flashlight, like everything else. When I'm outside, I hit it with a flashlight. Just look for any damage around the edges or broken glass or just something out of the ordinary. Failed seals. Sometimes you're going to have to replace the whole window when that happens. It's just makes more sense to replace the whole window. And what's a new window and plus installation these days? What, at least $1,000 for one?
Yeah, it'll depend on what type and size, but if you're just doing one, that's...
Yeah, I mean,
if you're doing 20, you'll get a discount.
Yeah, you get a little discount. As far as doors, here's a great topic. Doors. A lot of people like to take doors designed to open in and have them open out. I actually did a video on this on my YouTube channel because I come across it so often, and everyone seems to be like, huh? What do you mean it's backwards? It's pretty simple to look at if you understand how a door is supposed to work and how it's designed. When a door is installed correctly, if it's an in-swing door, then it opens into the house, whether it's a right-hand swing or a left-hand swing. But what I notice on a lot of these flipped houses especially, even some high-end ones I see it.
Yeah.
The door that's intended to open in was spun around and opens out. So the first thing you can notice on those is the hinges, the pins. You can knock out the pins from the outside of the house and just remove the door. You don't have to unlock it. You could just take the door right off. So that's number one indicator that this door may be installed backwards. And in some cases, you'll see the thresholds backwards. You can look at the threshold.
Right.
Now, the problem with the door being installed backwards is now the top and the two sides are now exposed to the weather. If it's incorrectly, there's a rubber seal that protects that the front of the door pushes up against, which protects those sides when it's installed right. And any door manufacturer is going to reject a claim about a door being faulty if it's installed backwards and if it's not painted on all 6 sides. So those are things
I want to get back to that painted on 6 sides, but keep going.
That's something you really want to pay attention to because in California we got way better weather out here than, of course, other areas of the country. So people with really tiny homes, they like to have the doors open out. I understand that. In some houses, it's like you have to make that door open out. But there's doors that are designed to open out that seal differently, that keep the door protected. So what I'm trying to get at is a lot of the times I see as door installed backwards, it's because no one took the time to buy the correct door to open outward. And that's what happens.
Right. Now, in Malibu and Topanga Canyon in particular, you get high winds and rain driving, and so the rain it rains sideways because of the high wind.
Sure.
So now we've got, it's more important on each door to be sealed properly. So the doors that swing inside, when you try and close them, they've automatically got, edges that are going to be, they're not really designed for spraying a hose on them all the time.
That's what I meant by what I mentioned earlier. Like
Yeah.
the sides are exposed now.
So so they have unique. You might have a door that leaks, where maybe if it was in Beverly Hills and covered with a roof cover,
Right.
it wouldn't get any water. It wouldn't leak like that.
Right.
Inspecting houses that, let's say, one of the outside doors are bowed, latches, but it pops out. And
Right. It sticks out when it kind of goes like this.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so almost 100% of the time I'll take, a mirror or my camera and look at the top of the door, and they haven't painted the top or bottom. So you haven't painted 6 sides,
Right.
you've only painted 4. And so wood is a peculiar thing, but if you have it not sealed on the top and bottom, it's going to allow moisture to come in and come out,
Yep.
A lot during the day, and it usually has a tendency to cup inward because moisture from the outside, just the way wood
Same
works.
with wood windows. Wood windows are very problematic. I love wood windows because you can paint them, and they're just nicer, But you need to really maintain those, as on an older window that's wood. You try to open it up, a casement window, and it's just sticking at the top, and the bottom starts coming. They're very susceptible to problems if you don't maintain them well.
Right.
You got to seal them.
So one of the things I do when I'm inspecting a newer house or remodeling is I'll check the tops and bottoms.
Yeah.
So, okay, if it's not sealed, well, it's, painter didn't finish his job.
Yeah. They typically don't paint the top of the trim around the doors on the inside too.
Oh.
If you ever really look, that they always leave that undone too.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, the door is what
No one's going to
causes
look up there.
But that's...
So
anyways, that's part of the doors and windows.
So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a link to the video I made about doors being installed backwards in the podcast description, so you guys can click on it, check out that video. I think you'll learn a lot from it if you're not aware of this problem already. Okay, next we'll get into attached decks, porches, patios, balconies, stairways, and their enclosures, handrails, and guardrails. Boy, that's a big one. Why don't you start with attached decks, bud?
Okay, talk about...
There's a lot there. So
There's a lot with decks. Deck failures can cause a lot of injury. You'll hear about that every once in a while, of the 20 people standing out on the deck and it just fails and gives way.
Safety issues, yep.
Yeah. So, one of the first things I'll look for, go around and look to see, is it anchored properly to the wall? Does it have a ledger board? Does it actually have large anchor bolts going in, and how it's attached? And there's all different kinds of other brackets.
Flashing.
Well, usually I'm thinking of wood decks, but
wood decks, when the ledger board's against the house, there should be a drip flashing on top of that.
Yeah, and
a lot of
times they mount it right under the stucco wall.
Yeah.
So then you get that soft stucco material in between. So theoretically, you're supposed to cut that out and have it positively attached to the framing. There's one deck I looked at. I was walking down to look at something else, and I thought, this deck's pretty good. And then as I come walking up the stairs, then I start, oh man, there's like 20 different pieces of rotted wood I didn't even notice when I was walking down.
Yeah.
So
it happens a lot, actually.
So on a deck that's, when they say attached decks, I guess because they got balconies over here, but I'll leave.
Yeah, we'll just start with one section at a time, because there's so many things right there.
But I guess that's enough I could say on that, what you're looking for. But
I can add to that.
Sure.
Attached decks, you want to look for wood to soil contact. A lot of times their posts are sitting in the ground. The bottom step is sitting on dirt. So that's wood to soil contact. It's not going to last. As soon as wood touches dirt, it's doomed. It's eventually just going to rot away. So, that's a no-brainer for most of us here already. But you just want to look for those little things. Now, what about spindle spacing? spindle spacing on a deck. Little kids falling through.
Well, that'll be on the handrail sections, but you just brought
True. Yeah.
you just brought a good point though.
Okay.
Is when we have, support posts that are into the ground, or what if they're just sitting on little concrete pier blocks? You start looking, you go, well, this is kind of a hillside property. It's kind of a red flag. Like, I don't think this is permitted. I don't think they engineered it right. There should be some better supports here.
Yeah.
When it's sticking down into the ground, you kind of go, well, that wouldn't have been allowed by the inspector.
There's all kinds of problems with decks. There's a lot of deck problems out there.
Yeah.
There's a lot. And the limitation on decks too. A lot of times they're completely sealed up all on the sides, and you can't look under them. Make sure you point that out, that you have a deck limitation, which means you can't see under the deck, which means you cannot comment on the supports. If you can't see the supports, make sure you write that up as limitations, because you don't want to get a call later going, well, hey, why didn't you tell me my deck was rotted underneath? Well, I couldn't get under there. Why didn't you tell me you couldn't get under there? That's how it happens.
Well, that's true. That's usually anything that's attached to the building, then that would be part of the termite inspector's report too, looking for rotted wood or
Sure.
evidence of wood destroying.
Yeah, but Bud, you're an inspector. Don't you look for termites? That's what I get asked every day. Oh, John, was there any termites? I'm like, I'm not a termite inspector. But you didn't see any termites. I'm not a termite inspector. Don't ask me about termites. If I see wood damage, I will let you know. But I'm not here to tell you do or do not have termites. And I get asked by realtors all the time.
Well,
they
a
still
lot of
don't
times when there's rotting wood, then it's soft and juicy wood and it attracts termites. So a lot of times termite reports, they'll say dry wood termite damage or some, because it's kind of like both.
Right.
So on one hand, from the structural issue, if we see any rotted wood that's compromising the structural integrity, we'd want to
write that up. Yeah. That's what I do.
Yeah.
But I don't say if it's a termite issue or anything else. I just say the wood's damaged. You need to get it fixed. That's my point.
Yeah, a lot of times I'll recommend to have a termite inspector do a full inspection and for further information.
For the evaluation. Yep.
Right. But yeah, if we find a live termite.
I only seen one.
Oh, really?
In a kitchen. The face of the cabinet. They were in the face of the cabinet. You know how you can pull the face of a cabinet off?
Oh, you had subterraneans inside there?
I went to open the two doors for under the sink.
Yeah.
I pulled one, and the whole face came off in my hands. And I was a live termite, like 2 or 3 of them right there. I'm like, holy shit, there's live termites. The realtor was right there when I did it. He goes, oh my God, that's crazy. I've never seen anything like it. But yeah, that really happened. And so I'm glad someone's seen it happen. So I didn't break anything. That thing was literally rotted away already. The whole face of that cabinet was just riddled with termites.
Well, that's where I would get into the joke of if I had one on my finger, I'd take a picture. And then I would go, there's some deterioration here. See the termite report for more information.
Yeah. I'm going to look that up and send you a picture of that. I actually took a shot of it.
That's pretty good because that sounds like that's a subterranean type that builds little tunnels and so they'll come in and from the ground and they'll eat. They're a lot more aggressive, and the dry wing termites will land somewhere, lay their eggs, and then they come out.
Yeah,
they don't keep staying there and eating the whole house.
Yeah, exactly.
Good
All right,
point.
so next one. Let's get to porches. Well, a porch would be the same thing. A porch might be made of concrete. It might be made of wood. So if it's wood, you're looking for the same issues that we just described. Patios. A lot of times you'll see patios with cracks.
Actually, I'd like to say something about porches. Is that a lot of times on older homes, they used to have a utility porch in the back.
Mm-hmm.
And then they now enclosed it, and now that's the laundry room or something.
Okay. Yeah.
So A lot of times they're not even, they're purposely sloped odd, so because it used to be a porch, so let water drain.
Oh yeah, okay.
So
You like the landing, concrete landing?
well, it might be concrete, but I was thinking of old homes, they'd have a wood porch and the utility porch, but it was, and then they enclose it, and then they add it to the kitchen
I'm
or
trying
something.
to remember if I actually seen one of those. I'm not sure I've seen one of those. Maybe I'm just not sure what you're describing.
So I'm just thinking of old homes. Sometimes you'll run into the porch in the middle of the house where now well, that's almost like a patio that they may have enclosed, but sometimes it could be a porch, some porch.
They turned it into a full enclosure then.
Right.
A full enclosure. Okay, I got you. Yep. I was talking about patios, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you ready to move on to there?
Sure.
All right, so patios, biggest thing I see with patios is damage, cracks, negative grade, no drains in them. Once again, we're going back to the drainage around the property.
Right.
And when you see a bunch of cracks in patios and there's no drains anywhere, well, stop guessing, because that's why there's a bunch of cracks. Water has nowhere to go, goes underneath the concrete, removes this, soil erosion underneath the concrete, and then those areas start to crack because they just can't support it. So that's basically patios in a nutshell right there. They all do the same thing. It's all the same thing.
Well, they quite often don't really prepare the soil properly.
Right.
So the sidewalks and the driveway and the patio, then they start settling weird because they didn't compact the soil and prepare it, so it's going to have soft places that'll erode and sink into.
Yeah, and it can also add another thing to that as well. Just as you were talking, something else, I thought about something else. I've been noticing on new houses, new construction, the house appears to have, in most areas, it has adequate clearance between the stucco, weep screed, and the ground or the walkway or the patio. But on one side of the house, they'll have the patio right up against the patio concrete right up against the stucco. And this is a brand new house, so I don't know how they got away with that, but they did.
I see that quite a bit, where it's usually what I see is they change the design of the patio while the house is being constructed. So now the patio is 4 inches taller. Mm-hmm. So,
and when they do that, they typically don't have a pitch on it. It's flat. Right. It's right up against the reason for it most of the time is there's a big sliding door there, or accordion door, and they want to walk smoothly out from the inside out without stepping down or stepping up, and they just want this smooth transition. That's nice and everything. It looks nice in a photo, but when it comes to a heavy storm and rain, that water has nowhere to go, and it can build up and get right underneath the door sill if they didn't seal it properly. So there's no positive to having that, and not to mention how it affects the stucco, because the weep screed is now covered in concrete. So that wall cannot get rid of any moisture that's in it, and that's the purpose of the weep screed. So if you see that, even if it's a brand new, shiny house, you still got to write it up. And I hate having to tell people that. I'm like, yeah, everything looks good except for this. And they were like, yeah, we kind of questioned that too, several times, so.
Well, that's a good point. There was a guy that talked last year at our chapter meeting, maybe probably a year and a half ago. It's back to doors, but those big multi-panel sliding glass doors and the track right there, so it comes out from inside to the outside. Mm-hmm. Those usually are not designed with any weep holes in it. So if any water that gets in there just is going to stay there, or if it's on the second floor, it's going to leak down into the walls. So that's back to the kind of a door detail. But
yeah, well, that's a good point. We should jump back to that real quick, because that made me think of something else. When you do a house with these, I call them accordion doors. They're all bifold doors, whatever you want to call them. Make sure you test them. So in other words, if you show up at the house and the listing agent got there before everybody else and all the doors are open, so everybody can just enjoy that backyard, make sure you close that door and make sure it closes easily with simple pulling on it like this. Got to remember, you know, a small woman might be trying to close that door, and if you think anyone but you is going to start having a hard time closing that door, then it's not set right, and it may need to be reset. So if you walk into the house,
very expensive, $2,000.
Very expensive, very expensive. So you want to make sure that you test those doors, make sure they lock properly, make sure all the latches work, because as you close the bifold door, you're going to find a latch you have to turn down to lock that section. A lot of times I see those installed and you can barely move them. So that's a big fix right there.
Yeah.
That's a big one. Don't avoid that. I mean, don't ignore that if you see it.
Okay. So next thing here is balconies.
Balconies is always a good topic, especially when there's a living area under it.
I went out to consult some guys, a brand new house they're building, and heavy rains 5 or 6 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. 2 of them were leaking. And it was a little complicated because the owner has a general contractor that built the deck and put the waterproofing on it. And the owner hired independently a tile man, and he then independently hired the handrail glass panels. So it starts leaking. Everyone's going, oh, the tile guy must have done it. Oh, the handrail guy must have done it.
Everyone's pointing fingers.
Yeah. No. So mostly I just went out there, let's do a water test. I felt like more like an arbitrator than like,
right.
You know, well, let's just look, and, you know, got out my little infrared camera and found where the leaking, pinpointed where it was. And so we go, okay, we need to.
Did you pull a fingerprint off the nail that went through it?
You know.
So you can blame the right person.
Well, they'd cut a big inspection hole.
Oh, they did?
On the ceiling, so you could stand down there.
Oh, that's good. That always helps.
But we found some other issues too. But it was like, there's a big laminated beam, which is like, a laminated beam is like real thick plywood, let's just say.
Sure.
Just like all these plies. And it's dripping down through the middle of that. So you go, well, we know the leak's right above where this beam meets. We just don't know what's going on top.
Right.
So you got to pull up the tiles.
Yep.
Handle it. There's a few cracked tiles. So anyway, everyone was on the same wavelength when, you know, by the time I was done. But
right.
But this is one thing I don't like about tile balconies. Is like, you look at it, it looks great, but water gets underneath the tile and it can leak, and so there's no obvious point that you can see. So, you know, waterproof, like a magnesite type coating, you can see it all. So if there's you know, you can see where the crack is or the hole.
Right.
And so it's easier to pinpoint. And then, of course,
I think those are the best finishes, like the fiberglass coatings, stuff like that, where you can actually see the coating. So like you said, so if it's damaged, well, you can see the damage and it needs to be fixed. So it's not hard, but when you're right. When tile's there, it's not the tile that's leaking. It's what's under it that's leaking. It should be waterproofed under there.
Right.
You know, so.
And then the waterproof, you know, really a lot of this what we're talking about in the exterior, we keep getting back to the waterproofing, the seal and the waterproofing. And,
the house needs to be watertight. It's that simple, you know. And
sometimes you can't. Most of the flashings in the stucco is underneath the stucco, so you can't see it on the outside.
Our hands are tied when we're looking at balconies most of the time. I was making look is for something obvious, like, wow, why is that flashing sticking out like that? Or, you know, it's got to be something really obvious for us to really go, hey, you know what? But then if we go underneath, we see stains. Well, that's an indication there's already a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, where the deck meets the wall, then here's this, is there a little weep screed there? Is there a piece of metal flashing? Right. Is there, you know, sometimes you just see the stucco and the deck come right up to it, and you kind of go,
is there a gap between the bottom threshold of the door and the deck? There should be something there.
Right. So that means whatever the seal is inside where you can't see it. So I usually like to see the metal flashing joint along the edges, so you know it's more reliable.
And I think one of the most interesting things about balconies is I see this typically on expensive houses. The balcony's flat. There's no pitch. I see this all the time on these fancy homes. I'm like, oh, here we go again. You know, it's another one. And typically a big fancy home has more than one balcony. It's probably 2 or 3, and they're all flat. And it's like, okay, well, where's the water going? Is there a drain on there? If there's no drain, it's got to be able to run off. So you got to make sure you take a look at that, because that can easily be overlooked.
Yeah, it reminds me of the other story. Well, that one house I was just talking to you about, we did the water testing. Right. And on one deck, they didn't have any drain or catch system. The water just boiled over the edge.
And probably damaged the stucco.
Well, boiled down the edge. Yeah. And then there's an indent, came back to feet, and then there's a sliding glass door. And they had left the sliding glass door open, so the water was just pouring inside.
Oh.
I took pictures. I go, we got to change this metal design and redirect this water.
Put some gutters around it or something.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes to control it. Yeah.
So it's all about, the dynamics of water.
Guys, water sucks. Water is the biggest problem with any house. It causes all kinds of problems. I mean, I can go on for days about water. Okay,
now, also on balconies, now there's also a new law coming into place with, this is mostly with commercial or 5 units or more. A balcony is considered an elevated element, is a legal term.
Okay.
So that means every few years you need to have that inspected. So, so that's a big thing with condominiums now.
Are you talking about a city inspector?
Actually, an approved inspector, a contractor.
Okay.
It talks about an
architect. A licensed contractor who does decks.
Right.
Okay. And
come up and actually examine them and making sure that there's no rotted wood and safety elements and so forth. So now we're just talking about the residential code here.
Right.
But it's always something to watch.
Residential standards, not code.
I'm sorry. Residential standards, not a code inspector.
We're not code inspectors. What the hell does that mean?
But quite often on waterproof decking, when you walk around, you see cracks, and when you walk on it, sometimes you find a soft spot, and you go, well, if there's a soft spot here, that means there's rotted wood underneath.
Or it wasn't screwed down properly in the first place.
It could be, it definitely needs some repair.
Yeah.
And now...
So take your time. Okay, everybody out there, take your time inspecting balconies, because you may get on there and there's a couple chairs out there and a table, and it might be hard to move around. Don't get distracted by that. Really look to make sure there's nothing obvious, because that would be an expensive repair and a bad phone call to get later.
Yeah, now that is a major problem with condominiums, because the HOA and the property managers don't access your individual balcony to look at it.
Right.
But since it's on the exterior, it's a HOA responsibility. So when one deck is failing, there's quite often that might be 10 other ones, and those can be very expensive to repair.
Absolutely.
So
man hours there.
Okay.
Stairways and their enclosures.
Well, in the 30s, when they'd have the steps coming up to the house, they would have them any size they wanted, Over there at Silver Lake Echo Park, you go.
A free-for-all.
Yeah. So there's a lot of codes for specifically, there's not supposed to be any variation in height.
On tread height.
And tread height.
Yeah, that's a big problem. I see that quite a bit, actually. Stair risers not uniform. One's 2 inches at the bottom, and the rest are 7 inches. And then you get to the top, and that one's 10 inches. Yeah, you can fall down the stairs. I've done it. I've tripped.
Yeah. It also is a good red flag, meaning, hey, this was done.
By a knucklehead, yeah.
Well, city inspector didn't approve this, so it might be unpermitted work.
Yep.
So, and when they say, and they're enclosures, that's an interesting way to.
Yeah, I'm trying to picture an enclosure on a staircase.
Well, sometimes that would be a stucco, a second floor duplex unit or a second floor stairwell, and it's going up, and it's all, so there's a closet underneath.
Yeah, I typically don't see stairs enclosed. Now, I've seen them on the outside, like you're saying, with a closet underneath, but the rest of it's not enclosed. Now, am I reading this wrong? Is it an enclosure like?
Well, sometimes on duplexes
like
or apartment where they have, the side door going upstairs to the, sometimes the units have a front door and then they have a side door, and that side door goes down.
I have yet to inspect something like that, honestly.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I think I'm not too concerned with that, but basically that's what we're supposed to inspect on. So if there's an enclosure there, we should look at it.
I'll make this note. If you are inspecting a multi-unit, and they have an outdoor staircase going up to like a second floor balcony area where all the other units are accessed, and there is a closet under those stairs, which means there's walls, which means most likely those stairs are made out of wood. Those treads, the stringers are all made out of wood, and they just have a fiberglass coating over the top to make them waterproof. So I would definitely try to get in that closet and look at that wood, because oftentimes you'll find damage there.
Yeah, and quite often there's no access. Sometimes there's not even any ventilation screen.
No, I'm saying it was a closet.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a closet I'm just referring to the one with a closet.
Right. But I've run into them where they're kind of enclosed, or the first landing comes up, and so there's a support system for the stairwells.
So you just want to call it that limitation that you couldn't look under the stairs.
Right.
So you got limitations. You can't look at it unless you open it up.
I can't wait for the next one.
Yeah. Right.
Handrails and guardrails.
Handrails and guardrails. Yeehaw. All right. I can start this one.
Okay.
All right. Handrails. What I see a lot, and it still blows my mind every time I see it, is horizontal 4-inch spacing on a second-story house. What about the kids? Is no one thinking about the kids climbing up that ladder? I'd be climbing on that if I was a kid, and they can climb right up and fall off the other side. I write that up a lot on brand new or newer homes.
Yeah.
And I tell them, if you got kids, you want to put some plexiglass over this, so you can still have the view, but you're safe now. The kids can't climb up it if they're little toddlers. But yeah, you can climb those all day long. That's nuts. I don't get how the city approves that. I don't get it.
Well, we can look at the codes, but I now on handrails, just on that alone, I'd like to make a couple of. There's old codes. There's been, I think, the first Uniform Building Code was issued in 1926. Okay, so when you get into drawings of different kinds of handrails, they're always designed to have a thumb grip, and there's very specific, like how much, how maximum width, what's the curve, how deep does it have to be indented for the thumb to grab it,
right?
And so quite often they go, well, it's really contemporary. I just want to have this 1x4 or the 2x4 horizontally, and there's no thumb grip. So
2x6s too. Yeah.
And so it's like, well, theoretically they have to, get in there with a router. I see that all the time.
Yeah.
And it's a design concept, but that's improper.
And some staircases. Oh, go ahead. I don't want to cut you off.
Oh, and then the other thing is handrails. Just a normal handrail that mounts with a wall bracket on the wall. These open ends, you're not supposed to have any open ends at the top and bottom. You have to miter that and have a piece returned
into the wall. Yeah.
So if it's just open ended, it's just kind of like these sticks that are hanging loose that can catch clothing and so forth.
Like purses and stuff. And,
right.
And you go flying because you get yanked backwards.
So those are the most two common things I see with, safety violations for handrails,
Right.
improper hand grip, and not returning to the wall.
Yeah. You know what else I see is staircases that are made out of wood and drywall, and they're capped
Yeah.
with a piece of like 1x6 or something. There's no rail on the wall itself, so people are looking at this as I'm like, that's not a handrail.
That's just a guardrail going down.
That's just a decorative piece on top of the wall. That's part of your staircase.
Right.
So technically there's no handrail there.
Right.
So I write that up all the time too. And spindle spacing.
Okay. Now that's kind of that's part of handrails and guardrails.
That's an important one. Spindle spacing nowadays is a 4-inch sphere.
Yeah.
Did I say it right?
Yeah.
Sphere. Okay. I use my hand's about 4 inches, so I always go like this.
Oh.
So I have my pre-made hand, and I just bring it to work. So I just use that as a gauge. If there's too much room in there, I just kind of go like that. So if so how do you report if you're inspecting an old house and it's got a 5-inch gap instead of a 4-inch gap, or maybe a 6-inch gap? Well, the home's built to older standards, and you just kind of let them know. It's got the original hand guardrails, and nowadays this is considered a safety hazard for kids. So recommended upgrade.
Right.
That's how you report it. You don't have to alarm everybody and go, "Oh my God, the rails, the kids are going to get their head stuck or fall through." You don't have to do that. You just need to let them know, "Hey, look, this is an older home, hasn't been upgraded. You have older railings. I recommend you have a railing contractor come out and recommend, making this more safe."
Yeah, because now guardrails are. A few years ago, they changed to 42 inches high. So it used to be 36 inches high, and I like it to be 42 because I'm over 6 feet. So 36 is still below my midpoint.
Sure.
And there have been instances of guys tripping, hitting it,
and
taller men. So
I don't have that problem.
Yeah.
I'd whack my head on the railing before I fell over.
But as you go into older buildings, and it used to be 32 or 30, and some apartments you go like that looks like it's 28 inches high, and those are way
too old. Now don't forget. Now, what do you do with these? What do they call these old buildings that have been there forever? They're
like a historic.
Yeah, historic buildings. What do you tell them? They can't change anything, right? Is that how that works?
It might.
So in this house, you can die legally by falling over that railing that's too low. Right. But on this house next to it that was just built, that's illegal. That makes no sense.
Well, now we're talking about codes, right? Yeah. So the code in 1925 or 26 is different than in 1990, which is different than 2005, which is now different than now. So at the time that it was built, it was code, but that doesn't mean it still could be a safety hazard. So now some insurance companies will actually come out and make the owner of the property convert, raise those higher or do something or make them smaller widths or so just. But usually people don't.
All right, we good on that?
Yeah. So the next one is for wall cladding and trim.
Okay, that's a whole subject in itself. First thing I would bring up on that is siding the ground clearance, which is a very common problem with any older home that's just built where the stucco runs into the dirt, where the grading just comes right up to the stucco. So, if you're a new inspector, that's kind of confusing. Well, how do I write that up? Well, it's an older building. The stucco was installed to an older standard. So at the minimum, you want to let your customers know, make sure your grading is right. Make sure you don't have any negative grade going towards the house. Make sure it slopes away. If you're able to, add some drains. Add rain gutters just to keep that from getting any worse than it possibly can already. So.
Well, quite often an old stucco that doesn't have, it goes right down to the ground. It'll wick. Well, as moisture gets on the wall, it migrates to the bottom, and there's no place for it
to escape.
To escape,
The
so
weed
it kind of deteriorates along the bottom.
Yeah.
So as long as it's down on the concrete footing section, then it's not necessarily going to be a problem. It's going to be cosmetic. But yeah, you always always want to make sure the surface grading is going away from the building. Now, if there's wall cladding that's wood siding and it's down to the dirt, that's a whole different issue. And quite
Another
often,
negative issue. Yeah.
and quite often I see that's caused because the landscaper has changed the planters, or they added more stuff, or over time things have built up, and now it's all the way up to the wood, and then once wood is in contact with wet soil, it will just start deteriorating.
Because when they went to landscaping school, the teacher decided not to talk about what happens to wood when it touches dirt.
Right.
So you got to watch people you hire. You know, they may be good at what their job is, but if they don't know what the other guy's job is and how those two don't mix, well, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
So yeah, and sprinkler heads right next to your house.
Oh, well,
That's not going to help your siding either.
No.
So
is there anything else we want to talk about? Wall cladding and trim.
Absolutely. Wall cladding and trim. What do we do when we're inspecting wall cladding and trim? Well, wall cladding is another word for siding. So wall siding, we'll call it for the layman out there. And, like we discussed, siding to ground clearance is an important thing to report. If it's lack of, you don't want to overlook that. And does the siding appear to be installed in a professional manner? Is the let's say, for example, we got wood siding, and you see a row here with the butt joints here, and then you see the one above it with the same butt joint, and you see the one above that with the same butt joint. That's wrong. That's not how you side a house.
Right.
Those butt joints are meant to be staggered. So that's the first indicator that Uncle Bob put this siding on.
Right.
So if you then take that information, store it in your head, and then you're walking around the building, you're probably going to notice a lot of other inconsistencies with the siding. So that's number one indicator. If you see butt joints lined up with each other, that's wrong. Even if you have T111 siding and you see all the seams on the same path going straight up, that's wrong too. Another thing with wood siding, it's really important to have drip edge flashing over windows and doors. A lot of times I see siding, I'm talking brand new houses with no metal drip cap over the windows and the door trim. Understand, it's wood. That water's going to sit on that wood, and if that wood's not painted properly or caulked properly, that water can get behind those areas. So when you build it, when you're siding a house, you start from the bottom and work your way up. As you're coming up to the top of that window, that flashing goes on first up against the Tyvek paper, and then your siding comes around, sits on top of it, and the next row goes up. So all the water continues to flow down. So those are things I see a lot, and I do point that out on a brand new house with no metal drip cap. And if it's got a big eave, like a really long eave, and the window's right above it here, I won't call it out because that's protected.
Okay.
But if it's a real open-faced wall on a first floor, I would definitely look for it there and make sure it's there. And a lot of times it's missing. So back to T111, which is like a plywood. That's a fancy plywood, and it's got the
grooves in it, so it looks like wood siding.
Yeah, a lot of people use it on garages and stuff like that. And so if you see that type of siding, and there's a big wall, or like a 2-story wall, and then you see the two pieces butted together like this, and there's no flashing in the middle, that's wrong. That has to have flashing. Water's going to get right in there. And the biggest pointer I'll tell everybody is when you're looking at siding, if you see the caulking splitting, and you can see the butt joints separating, you got to call it out. They got to get that caulked up and sealed, especially if it's at fiberwood. I'm sorry, composite. composite wood and stuff like that, you really got to make sure that stuff is watertight.
Well, there was a bunch of brands back in the 80s that it turned out not to be waterproof, and they grew mushrooms and swelled out. And,
Yeah, the swell, because it's like a sponge.
Yeah.
It just absorbs water. So you really have to stay on top of those.
You must inspect really a lot nicer houses than I do. I'm just kidding.
Why you don't see these issues?
Well,
I've cited houses before, so I understand how it's supposed to be.
Well, there you go. And of course, what I see quite often in an older home with wood siding, I always look close. Like, it always bothers me when you go, they never really prepped the house very well before the last time they painted it. So you can see all these ugly
pimples in the paint.
3 different layers of paint underneath this top coat, and then if you can get into the basement or inside a garage and look at the siding from inside, you see all these air gaps and lights shining through, and but on an older house, I look carefully and like, well, how well is it painted? Because that kind of it'll show you how well the house has been maintained for the last 80 years.
Yeah.
If it's well painted, you go, well, somebody's done.
Someone cares about their investment.
Yeah.
A home is an investment. You got to treat it like that all the time. So if you don't, well, it's going to cost you more money later.
But all of this we're really talking about anything that you see that looks odd or gaps or obvious thing, corners of the house with wood siding that the trim oftentimes is rotted or missing.
Yeah.
So there's gaps, so those are kind of the obvious things that you report on. Anything else you wanted to?
On siding, another thing I will point out with siding, if the house does not have rain gutters, remember that water coming off that roof is going to bounce on the ground and hit that siding, whether it's stucco, wood, whatever it is. And if it's all discolored at the bottom, that's most likely what's causing that. So you want to just recommend, hey, look, you need to paint your siding, but you also need to add gutters, otherwise it's going to happen again. So, and it can really deteriorate stucco. The finish will start peeling off, the top coat and all that will start peeling off, and keep your eye out for rusted weep screed too. When you see sprinkler heads up against a house, look for rusted weep screed. You want to make sure you call that out, because that happens a lot too.
Yeah.
That's it for me on that.
Okay, so the next thing, 5, is portions of walkways and driveways that are adjacent to the buildings. So, of course, there again, we also want to look back to make sure that the surface grade is, water drains away from the building.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times when we're looking at that, it doesn't rain that frequently in LA. So sometimes I have to look for, when there's a dried puddle of water that's dried up, you'll see little ponding marks.
Oh, yeah.
So sometimes kind of look at those and like, where's the water ponding and so forth. And then I think my most common defect that I'll comment on is anytime that a sidewalk is shifted and cracked and is raised enough, over a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, then it becomes a trip hazard.
Right.
So I always like to note those.
Yep.
Now it says on this standard is adjacent to the buildings. I usually make those comments on the front sidewalks too, near the street.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So now that's a little outside our normal standards, but that's
Just make them aware of it. Just make your clients aware of it.
yeah, because a lot of people think, oh, the city takes care of that. And they go, some cities do, and sometimes they don't, or it's a 3-year waiting list for them to fix it.
Don't assume. Just write it up. Just be done with it.
There's a lot you can look at, but in reality, the way the law is written is the homeowner is responsible for that front sidewalk. So if somebody trips and falls and goes to the hospital and their insurance company is paying for their insurance bill, the insurance company is going to go, well, what was his address? Oh. So they don't sue the city; they sue the homeowner.
Yeah.
So, so anyway, trip hazards is important. Now, I think I mentioned this earlier, though, is a lot of times the driveways and the sidewalks, they didn't prepare the soil in the same manner that they prepared the foundation of the house.
Right.
So a lot of times you just have loose fill dirt that's there, and then they put the 2-inch pad of concrete for the sidewalks and maybe 3-inch for the driveway or something like that. And then as the soil compacts further or settles or something, then that's where you're going to get shifting sidewalk. Of course, right. Your ficus trees nearby or some, there's tree roots that lift it up.
Depending on how old the building is. And, remember, I say this to my clients a lot because a lot of times clients ask, well, is the cracked walkway affecting my foundation? Well, no, they're two separate things. The house is built first, and then the grading is done, and then the walkways are poured later. So they're not connected. So they need to be installed right. Most of the time they're not. They're just made too high. So that when they built the house, especially on new construction, they get a nice 6-inch gap between the weepscrete and the dirt. And then the concrete guy's like, well, let's just fill this up with dirt some more. We'll run that concrete right into the stucco. Like, how do they not know that that's not a good thing? I mean, that's kind of weird.
Yeah,
the general contractors have got to have some knowledge of this.
Yeah, I've consulted some guys where that was a change order from the client request to change the patio. And
right.
So now you get, gee, we've already got these other sidewalks in, and how are we going to do this? And
that's a scenario I do explain to customers that, the owners probably demanded this. They probably said, we want this high, do it, or we'll get someone else to do it. So they just, threw the codes out the window.
Yeah. So this next item 6, it talks about pool or spa drowning prevention features, etc. And I think I'd rather leave that just for a whole separate.
Yeah, that's a whole separate. All right, that's going to be a whole separate section to do because that's a lengthy one. And I will pull out my report for that, and I'll go through how I have it all listed, which makes it a lot easier to understand because I can just read right through it. But yeah, so anything else you want to add to this? Any little remarks or experiences?
Well, we could read through the things that what the inspector is not required to do.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. All right. So the inspector is not required to inspect door or window screens, shutters, awnings, or security bars. However, if you see these things, I wouldn't ignore them. I mean, security bars. I would definitely make a note that the house does have security bars because they have to operate. We don't test those. You're just making your customer aware that they're there because they may not know what they are. Some people just don't understand these things.
And it's not uncommon that I find that they don't have the quick release devices on. Right. So, you need a fire escape from a bedroom besides the one single door to the hallway. So if you can't get through that, then that's a
fire hazard.
Yeah.
Safety hazard too. Okay. Inspector is also not required to inspect fences, gates, or operate automated door or gate openers or their safety devices. So electric driveway gates, we show you if someone's got the remote, you can always push the button, see if it opens.
Right.
But we're still not going to inspect the motor and the chain and all that. We just don't inspect those. So I always write that up that I don't inspect those. That's how I do it.
Yeah, I don't try and check the safety reverse feature with a light pressure or something on these gates. It's kind of hard.
Yeah. Sometimes being a home inspector, when you're by yourself, you can't do certain tests. Yeah, if you're by yourself, you can't do certain things, Fences and gates. Let's talk about that for a second. So I report on fences and gates when they're falling down. So that's a safety issue. So our number one thing as a home inspector is to report safety issues. So if I see a cinder block wall and it's leaning like this and there's a piece of wood holding it up, I make a note of that because that could fall on somebody. But in general, I don't comment on fences unless they're really damaged. Because a lot of times these California, we have all these concrete block fencing separating properties, and they all crack. because the footing is just too thin, and watering the lawn and rainwater, it just makes it all just fall apart over time, and they just don't hold together. So they're always cracking and falling apart.
Well, I will. I know. I've got a little disclaimer in there. It's typically, beyond a general inspection to evaluate the fencing, or especially big properties where you go, phew, I don't feel like walking.
4 miles.
Yeah. Around this property, right. I'll just go, don't see it. But on the other hand, just for the courtesy for my buyer, so many people have pets.
Yeah.
I'll try and look at them and just think, well, if I have a small dog, are there holes in the fences, or how's this, so the gate that doesn't lock, or some things like that, I'll make mention of it. But it's really beyond a normal or standards.
Right. Okay, we took care of that. Inspectors also not required to use a ladder to inspect systems or components. Oh, we always use ladders, so not quite sure why that's still in there, but it is. We're not going to get into number 4, which is determine if ASTM standards are met. We're going to cover that in the pool section next time. That's going to be its whole own section right there, because that's a pretty lengthy one. And test or operate any drowning prevention. Once again, that's for pools. So that's about it for exteriors, section 2 of the CREIA standards. Does the studio audience have any questions? Had to throw that in there. All right, so let's see. That's about it for this.
I know we're probably running overtime.
No such thing as overtime. It's a podcast. It's a video. It goes as long as you want.
Okay.
But if you got to go home, I understand.
Well, this would probably be a good time to end off, because the next section we're going to talk about is roof covering.
Oh yeah. No, we're done for tonight. We just want to have a little small talk with you now. Anything regarding what exterior section? Any notes for other inspectors you might have, or any tips and tricks?
Well, a common saying that we say here is, observe and report. So what you observe, if it looks funny, then you could just say, hey, this looks funny. But you can put it in a professional way, like, this does not look like a normal procedure. We should check and verify with an appropriate specialist to verify.
Yeah, the second part of being a home inspector is learning how to write reports.
Yeah.
So report writing is something I'm eventually going to start talking about and discussing, because it's very important. You don't just want to blanket everything. Oh yeah, the whole house looks like shit. You can't do that. You gotta break it down and call out these separate areas. Hey, the HVAC system looks like this, or the electrical looks like this. But what Bud's referring to is report writing, how to write it, and that's a whole different podcast right there.
Yeah.
Something I do have to address, and I do want to get into it, because that alone is its own craft. Some people write really bad reports. Some people write really good reports.
And there's different philosophies on that.
Yeah.
And we could talk a lot about that.
I would like to. I'm gonna construct a way to do that. I just haven't done it yet. I haven't had the time to think about it much. So I'm gonna get to that eventually and incorporate this into the show. So
we can have some good discussions on that.
Yes.
Because now back to this. Just a simple thing, how I view report writing is, of course, you want to describe what you see, and us being generalists, our job is to recommend further evaluation by the approved professional,
right, for
a more in-depth analysis. But we need to keep our report, what we say in our report, easy to be understood by the client.
Layman's terms.
Yeah.
You want to explain it in a not so technical way, but not just like, oh, you got to fix this. You can't just say that. What's the condition? What's the defect? this condition can cause this to happen. You want to let them know what can happen if they ignore it, in other words. So
Yeah, but if you get too wordy on it, then they're going to look at this important big paragraph, even if you got it in red, and they're not really going to understand it.
right.
So that would be number one. But going back to your earlier question, what kind of tips that I would give for other inspectors is, we're talking about that one wood deck where I was going down the stairs, it looked pretty good.
Yeah.
And then I got underneath and I go, oh, and then as I go up the stairs, I start seeing rotted wood and, notice all these places. So one thing I try to do is when I walk around the house, I'll go back and walk around the house the other way. Or if I'm on the roof looking at it from one place, sometimes I'll walk across the roof and turn around and start looking.
Same thing in an attic. The same thing in an attic. You can go one way in an attic, and then you turn around, and, oh, shit, I didn't see that on the way.
Yeah.
You got to get in the attic, yeah.
So you're changing your viewpoint of position to just be able to observe things differently. So, but I like the general concept of walking around the house both directions. And of course, sometimes the hardest thing is where you find something noticeably wrong. And so all your attention goes to that thing, and then you walk off so that you don't see the other three important items that are right there. Sometimes there can be so many things wrong. In a small area that it.
Yeah.
I think there's one closet and a window and a door and at the stairs, and there's water damage on the wall. And I started looking at it, and there's like three different, it's coming in underneath the door and by the window, and then this outside wall. It's like you got a
perfect storm.
Yeah. So, but to just the simple thing is walk around the other direction or take a different view as you're walking through. I think you can see more items.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. That's all the tips and tricks I got for today. It's about time to call this episode a wrap. So that's the end of CREIA Standards of Practice, Section 2, Exteriors. All right, thanks, everybody, for listening. And, Bud, thanks again for coming in and taking the time. It's easier to do with two people. I can't do this on my own.
No, that's a lot of editing.
Yeah.
And costume changes every 30 seconds.
Costume changes. Got to keep changing my mustache and everything else and my wigs. So, like I said, if you know any newer inspectors, as well as experienced, I want to get more people on here. Maybe somebody out there has something they want to talk about. That's great. If anybody mentions something, just let me know, and I'll invite them on, and we can have a discussion about it. But I want to get definitely some new guys or new girls, whoever's out there, and just see where their head's at. I'm curious. I wish when I started years ago, somebody would have sat me down and go, "Hey, what are your questions? What do you want to know?"
Yeah,
that was hard, man. A lot of you learn on your own.
Yeah. So that's what's great about the CREIA Association is there's other guys to network with.
Yeah. You got a question on a house, you're not sure how to describe it, you can call one of us or reach out by, Facebook or email, whatever, and just say, "Hey, have you seen this before? How do I write this?" It happens all the time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Facebook forums out there, groups and stuff like that everyone's always sharing information.
Well, with smartphones, newer inspectors, I don't know how many times they'll get like pictures sent to me while they're in the basement. What the hell is this?
I do that with plumbers, electricians all the time.
Yeah.
Hey, can you help me out with this? I haven't seen this one yet.
Yeah.
I don't know everything, man. I'm just learning. Every day I go to work, I learn something new.
I think every week I'll see something that I'll go, I never saw that before.
Right.
So
and
keep you on your toes.
This for a minute. So thanks, Bud.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, everybody. See you on the next one.